On the morning of Sunday, February 22, 2026, the death of Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, alias El Mencho, the supreme leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, was announced. El Mencho, 59, was the co-founder of the CJNG, an organization that in a single decade managed to expand across much of the national territory, consolidating itself as one of the criminal structures with the greatest operational capacity and violence. The United States government offered up to $15 million for information leading to his capture, while in Mexico, he stood as one of the top priority targets, basically the Mexican Osama bin Laden. What began as a chain of rumors accompanied by outbreaks of violence in different parts of the country ended up escalating into one of the most significant events for Mexican national security in the last decade. According to preliminary information, the operation combined high-level strategic intelligence, interinstitutional coordination, intelligence provided by the United States, and precise tactical execution. Participants in this operation included elements of the Mexican Army Special Forces and the National Guard, the Attorney General's Office of the Republic, the Mexican National Intelligence Center CINI, and military intelligence areas. The question now is inevitable. How was this mega operation actually orchestrated? What role did the intelligence shared by the United States play? And above all, what does the death of the Lord of the Roosters imply for the future of the war against narco-trafficking? Who will be his successor? And how will the criminal map in Mexico be reconfigured? Well, you are about to learn all of that. This is John Michael. Welcome to Unsolved Shadow. You see, the first signs of the operation began a day earlier, on February 21st, 2026. Neighbors of the exclusive Tapalpa Country Club complex in Jalisco reported an unusual flyover. Two military helicopters circled the area a couple of times and then withdrew. Nothing scandalous at first glance. But in Tapalpa, Jalisco, and even less so in that residential area, these types of military movements are not normal. Tapalpa is a pueblo mxico and a tourist destination known for its forested landscapes and isolated cabins in the Sierra Madre del Sur of Jalisco. Although it is well known that some parts are bastions of the CJNG, that was the first indication. Nonetheless, on the morning of Sunday, February 22, around 7 a.m., as dawn broke through the mountain forests, the scene changed radically. Witnesses reported the sighting of 4 military helicopters, possibly a 60 Black Hawks armed with M134 miniguns, accompanied by 2 T-6 Texan II aircraft of the Mexican Air Force. At 7:20 a.m., tighter maneuvers began over the country club developments and the El Pinto Ranch, located about 7 km from the center of Tapalpa, Jalisco, near the Nogal Dam. Minutes later, the first bursts of gunfire were heard. Armed helicopters, according to multiple testimonies, were firing toward the ground while federal forces advanced along the rural roads leading to the El Pinto Ranch. The confrontation reportedly lasted for approximately 2 hours. You see, for years, El Mencho built a complex network of protection, safe houses, surveillance rings, alternate routes, and shelters distributed throughout Jalisco, Colima, Nayarit, Guanajuato, and Michoacán. His constant mobility was his main armor. That operational discipline fueled the perception for years that his capture was practically impossible, very similar to how we thought of El Mayo Zambada. Now, although official information is limited and many details will likely not be revealed soon, everything points to the central events occurring at the El Pinto Ranch, located just 2 km from the Tapalpa Country Club complex. It is not known for certain what El Mencho was doing at that ranch or near it. It could have been a period of rest in the forest of the Sierra Madre del Sur, or perhaps a strategic meeting. We don't know. What is consistent with his history is that he traveled with his closest security circle, basically his Praetorian Guard, as in practically all of his movements. What they apparently failed to detect was that the movement was already underway. According to the official communique from the Secretariat of National Defense, Special Forces of the Mexican Army, possibly from the Joint Special Force or the Special Forces of the Paratrooper Rifleman Brigade, supported by the Rapid Reaction Special Force of the National Guard. Executed an operation based on months of strategic intelligence with collaboration from the National Intelligence Center and the Specialized Prosecutor's Office for Organized Crime, to whom the United States had, in turn, delivered extremely important intelligence packages for this operation. And well, whether under the approval of President Claudia Sheinbaum, the Secretary of Security Omar Harfuch, the Secretary of National Defense Ricardo Trevilla Trejo, or all three, someone at the pinnacle of the security apparatus gave the green light. During the heavy exchange of fire, 4 members of the CJNG were killed at the scene, and 3 others were seriously wounded. All of them were presumably members of the security ring closest to Mencho. In some closed channels, alleged names of high-level CJNG members have begun to circulate. Among the aliases mentioned are El Sapo, El Alacern, El Rebelde, the R1, who according to this is the son of to the R3, the J1, El Fresa, El Tigre, El Chaparro, and Comandante Pai. It is important to emphasize that all these names and aliases come from unofficial sources, and their participation or death while trying to protect El Mencho has not been confirmed by Mexican or U.S. authorities. Continuing, among the 3 seriously wounded members of the CJNG was Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes himself, alias El Mencho, or the Lord of the Roosters, as well as one of his most relevant lieutenants, Gonzalo Mendoza Gaitan, alias El Sapo, identified as one of the most violent and strategic operators within the cartel. During this operation, armored vehicles of artisanal manufacture known as monsters or narco tanks were seized, along with rocket launchers with anti-armor capability and potential to threaten low-altitude aircraft, and high-caliber assault rifles and light machine guns. As I mentioned, at the time of recording this video, the information is still very limited, but it is already enough to reconstruct a preliminary overview of what happened. Now, as the hours advanced, at approximately 9:34 am in Jalisco, Governor Pablo Lemus Navarro confirmed what many already suspected: a high-impact operation was unfolding in the municipality of Tapalpa, Jalisco. The death of El Mencho triggered an immediate reaction from the CJNG. From the early hours of the day, narco blockades were recorded on highways, vehicle fires, and attacks on stores and establishments in various areas of Jalisco. In several cities, public transportation services were suspended as a preventive measure, while authorities urged the population to remain in their homes for safety reasons. But as the hours went by, the blockades extended to neighboring states. Guanajuato, Michoacán, Nayarit, and Aguascalientes reported similar incidents, and later, events began to be recorded in Tamaulipas and other states of the country hundreds of kilometers from the initial epicenter. The geographic expansion suggests a coordinated reaction more oriented toward generating pressure and chaos than toward controlling specific territory. Because faced with the magnitude of the criminal response, Jalisco authorities activated Code Red, the maximum level of alert in Jalisco. And well, this tactic of the Mexican cartels used by the CJNG is known in the security field as distraction urban terrorism. This does not seek to conquer territory, but to saturate the state's response capacity, forcing it to disperse forces to attend to fires, protect civilians, and restore order. But the real objective is to dilute the pressure on the critical point of the operation. Seriously, this is probably one of the largest episodes of narco blockades and federal deployment for securing highways in the recent history of Mexico. In the Bajo region, the mobilization was impressive with convoys, checkpoints, aerial presence, and simultaneous operations in multiple municipalities. Those who were there know exactly what I mean. However, it was not until 11:10 in the morning when an official communique from Defense confirmed that Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes had died. In this official communique, it was clearly stated that the leader of the cartel did not die immediately at the point of contact. According to the information, he was seriously wounded during the confrontation and subsequently evacuated by air, presumably in a military helicopter or aircraft bound for Mexico City, where he was to receive specialized care, but he died during the aerial transfer. And it is fundamental to repeat it. According to the official version, Mencho was captured alive but seriously wounded during the operation, but subsequently succumbed to the injuries sustained. From an operational and legal point of view, it is a capture followed by death due to combat injuries, not an execution or an instantaneous death at the site. Because just imagine this scene: Mencho, seriously wounded along with two of his bodyguards, including El Sapo, is immediately evacuated in a military aircraft heading to Mexico City. The protocol was clear: urgent aerial extraction, and in mid-flight, slowly bleeding out, the most powerful man in organized crime in Mexico dies. Not in a cell, not in a courtroom, but between the mountains and the sky after an armed confrontation with special forces that finally ended his life. Unlike previous operations that ended in tactical retreats, or episodes like the so-called Culiacanazos in Sinaloa, on this occasion, the government of Mexico and Jalisco sustained the offensive until the priority objective was achieved. After the official communique from the Secretariat of National Defense, President Claudia Sheinbaum publicly congratulated the Mexican Army and the National Guard, validating the result of the deployment and sending a clear political message of institutional support. For his part, the Secretary of Security and Citizen Protection, Omar Harfuch, highlighted the participation of the Mexican Air Force and the Army, emphasizing interinstitutional coordination and confirming the truth of the reported facts. The cost to the state was also real. 3 elements of the Special Forces were wounded during the confrontation against Mencho's security ring and, unfortunately, lost their lives. However, with updated information at the close of February 22, 2026, the national count reports 21 fallen National Guard elements in the line of duty, in addition to 18 members of the Mexican Army and 3 officers, plus 13 wounded elements in different parts of the country. From Armapedia, we send our condolences to the families of the fallen Mexican military personnel. Now, the body of Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, as well as that of El Sapo, would have arrived in Mexico City around 16:30 hours under strict security protocols. Upon arrival, Mencho's body was received by specialized forensic personnel and transferred in a forensic unit to facilities under federal custody. Those who do not live in Mexico City can hardly dimension the magnitude of the police and military deployment experienced in the capital. The operational destination would be the Specialized Prosecutor's Office for Organized Crime, where the corresponding legal procedures in high-profile cases were activated. In these types of situations, visual recognition is not enough. Complete forensic reports are performed, including the legal autopsy, biometric identification tests, fingerprint analysis, genetic comparison, forensic dental review, and detailed photographic documentation to integrate the investigation file. These protocols not only confirm the identity of the target, but also determine the exact cause of death and preserve the chain of custody, a critical element when dealing with the taking down of a high-value capo. But here is a detail that says a lot in a few words. You see, the communique from the Mexican Secretariat of National Defense is particularly revealing when mentioning bilateral coordination and cooperation with the United States. That phrase is not decorative. In operational terms, it suggests a much deeper technological and intelligence component than what is perceived at first glance. Because you see, in these types of high-value operations, signals intelligence, metadata analysis, intelligence fusion, and the use of ISR intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms by the Americans are usually decisive. The tracking of satellite communications, electronic patterns, digital signatures, and logistical movements, an area where U.S. agencies maintain a considerable technological advantage, could have been key to locating the exact refuge in the forested area of Tapalpa, Jalisco. Various international media outlets like Reuters reported that there is support from the Joint Interagency Task Force Against Cartels, a structure under the command of the United States Northern Command designed specifically to map, disrupt, and strike transnational criminal networks that impact U.S. security. Nonetheless, this operational force, integrated by multiple U.S. government agencies, has as its central objective the consolidation of interagency, military, police, and intelligence community intelligence to build detailed target packages on criminal leaders and their logistical networks on both sides of the border. A former U.S. official, under condition of anonymity, stated that a detailed dossier had been built on El Mencho. However, both U.S. officials and Mexican government sources emphasized that the incursion was an operation designed and executed by Mexico, by Mexican soldiers, without physical participation of U.S. military personnel on the ground. And yes, I understand there may be doubts about that, but the truth is, we will never know. It was not until 1954 hours when Caroline Leavitt, spokesperson for the Donald Trump administration, issued a statement through X, Parlitonis, confirming that the United States did provide intelligence information to the Mexican government to contribute to the success of the operation that culminated in the taking down of El Mencho. However, the U.S. spokesperson did not offer additional details on which agency or specific force participated in generating the intelligence, nor did she clarify if there was any additional level of U.S. involvement beyond the exchange of information and intelligence. The death of El Mencho does not only represent a symbolic achievement for the Mexican and U.S. governments, it constitutes a direct blow to the center of gravity of a criminal organization that has historically operated under a highly centralized command scheme. Because you see, unlike the Sinaloa cartel, which today functions more as a federation of factions in a civil war, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel consolidated itself for years around a disciplined, vertical leadership with operational control concentrated in the figure of El Mencho, almost like a dictator and other high-ranking commanders of his trust. That model allowed the CJNG to expand rapidly, impose internal cohesion, and project territorial power for more than a decade. However, it also implies a risk. When the leader falls, the vacuum can become a fracture point that leads to more violence. For this reason, many analysts have focused on 4 key figures who, due to their hierarchy, territorial control, and closeness to the late El Mencho, are seen as the possible heirs to the criminal empire. Number 1. Juan Carlos Valencia González, the O3. You see, the O3 is considered by some analysts as the natural candidate. He is identified as El Mencho's stepson, which would grant him symbolic legitimacy within the internal structure of the cartel, especially after the capture and extradition of Rubén Oseguera González, El Menchito, the leader's biological son who for years was seen as the direct heir. But, in addition to the family factor, his operational weight is very relevant. The O3 is linked to the leadership of the so-called elite group, one of the most aggressive cells of the CJNG. However, his leadership would not be without tensions. The plaza bosses with more seniority, territorial autonomy, and financial control could question his authority, especially if they perceive that his legitimacy rests more on the last name than on operational consensus. Number 2. Audias Flores Silva, El Jardinero. This is perhaps the strategist with the greatest operational power within the CJNG. His most trusted men call themselves Gente del Jardinero, the gardener's people. El Jardinero controls the production and trafficking of synthetic drugs in the Pacific Zone and is in charge of security in the Bastion of Nayarit, as well as other zones in Michoacán and Jalisco. El Jardinero is considered a businessman with fierce military discipline, which makes him a candidate capable of maintaining the financial and logistical structure of the CJNG. Number 3. Heraclio Guerrero Martinez, TO. This represents the cartel's connection with local self-defense networks and groups in Michoacán, as well as the CJNG's Huachical networks. His importance lies in his knowledge of the terrain and his strategic alliances for the control of chemical precursors in the ports of Luzaro Cardenas and Manzanillo. Although he is a high-ranking figure, his profile is more that of a regional operator than a global leader of the organization. Furthermore, it should be made clear that one of his sons, known as R1, died in the operation against El Mencho. Number 4. Ricardo Ruiz Velasco, RR. This is the operational commander with the most media exposure, famous for propaganda videos showing the cartel's firepower, as well as for ordering the murder of a Mexican influencer. He is one of the plaza bosses in the Guadalajara metropolitan area and is responsible for the armed response to federal operations. His loyalty to El Mencho's family has been total, but his impulsive, loud, and violent style could be an obstacle if the organization seeks a stage of less confrontation with the Mexican state. So, the fall of El Mencho represents, without a doubt, the most relevant turning point in the security strategy of the administration headed by Claudia Sheinbaum and Secretary Omar Harfuch. However, historical experience is very clear. Drug trafficking in Mexico operates like a hydra. The elimination of one head does not guarantee the disappearance of the body. The real challenge was not only to win the battle in the mountains of Jalisco, but to sustain territorial control, prevent violent fragmentation, and avoid a power vacuum from triggering new regional wars. The Lord of the Roosters has fallen, but the structure he built remains: financial networks, armed cells, logistical routes, and middle management, who now face a stage of redefinition. The coming weeks and months will be decisive in determining if this blow marks the beginning of the structural weakening of the CJNG or if we are facing a more aggressive and decentralized reconfiguration. This video is dedicated to the men of the Mexican Army Special Forces and the National Guard who lost their lives during the operation in Jalisco. Their sacrifice in the line of duty will not be forgotten. We honor their courage, their discipline, and their dedication to the country. Honor and glory to those who fell. Our most sincere solidarity and prompt resignation to their families. I take the opportunity first to give my condolences to the families of our colleagues who also lost their lives. We give recognition to our military personnel who carried out a successful operation. It can be seen from many points of view, but it is definitive that they fulfilled their mission. And what was demonstrated? The strength of the Mexican state. Of that, there is no doubt. Thank you.